Welcome to Sew Very Easy. My name is Laura, and today I'd like to share with you a really fun project to make for Valentine's Day. Now this project could be very cute, it could be very corny, and it could be a lot of fun. And everyone will be very different. So you can customize it to whom you want to give your Valentine to. And the project is a fabric envelope. We have a spot in the front where we can write the address. And in the back, we do have an opening where we can put a letter or something really nice. And we get to decorate the back and the flap. And all of these can be designed for a special person in mind. I have some that are going to go to my grandchildren. I have one grandchild who loves to cook, one who's newly born, and I did give him a quilt out of this fabric. So this will be his first Valentine. I have a little fisherman in the family. So I have a little fish envelope that I can put his first Valentine in. I do have a granddaughter, so this is the fabric from her quilt. So it was a little panel piece that I was able to cut out and cut out the words. And I fused on those extra words with some fun buttons and a great little flap. But for my husband, it's going to be a little bit different. I've designed his envelope with a little bit more of a personal touch. I'll put this in the description if you do want to follow along. I think it'll be easier if I give you the measurements as we go along. So the first thing we're going to start with is this little inside piece. The envelopes are going to finish at about 8 inches by 5.5 inches. So we need a little piece of fabric, a little bit bigger than that. And I'm going to be using a fusible fleece. So it's fusible on one side. So we can fuse this fleece right on top of the fabric. But what we do want to do is when we fuse this fleece onto the back side of the fabric and leave a little piece up at the top, because after that's fused, we're going to be able to roll this down. And that's going to give us a nice finish at the top. Be sure to follow the directions for your fusible fleece because they all vary slightly. But I do like to press with a little pressing cloth on top, and that way nothing gets stuck on my iron and my iron doesn't get stuck on any of the fabric. So I'm going to just fuse that first layer onto my fabric. I like to fuse from one side and then turn it over and fuse from the second side. And that way I make sure that it sticks. And with all fusible items, it's important that you let it cool slightly before you move it. That way the glue has a chance to set. Now I'm going to be able to glue this little lip on top of the fleece. And we can use any glue at all because it's just to stick it on here until we get to work on it. So a child's glue stick will work just fine. And this one is a purple disappearing one, but it will wash out. When I turn it over, I do have one finished edge, and that is this top piece right here. Now that we have this fused down, we can cut it to the size we want. I do recommend an 8 inch by 5.5 inches. And the reason is it will fit inside these small bubble envelopes. And this is a size 0. And having it fit in here means I can mail this now. So let's trim this down. Once this little piece has been trimmed, we need to make these little flaps in the back. We are going to need 2 big pieces of fabric, and it won't matter what fabric you use. And I like to start with a big 12-inch square, and I will need 2 of these. The reason I want them big is because I'm going to lay them down and then trim off the edges, and that way I don't have to worry about the exact size. Fold the square in half and press. And that fold is going to go from one corner down to the other. So we need to start with this finished edge up at the top. Match up one corner, match up the second corner. And you can do it from behind because you will be able to see your corners. Once my corners match, I'm going to pin my layers. As you can see, this 12.5 inch piece is quite big, but it does save me from measuring. There are 2 other ways we can make those flaps. We can make a template and then cut out the shape. We can also take that fabric, just fold it down and do a row of top stitching. So instead of a full fold, you're only going to have this little seam allowance go over. It won't matter how we make our flap, but the flap does need to go from corner to corner. And we do need that finished edge. From here, we need to do a little row of stitching as close as we can to this edge. Once that first flap has been stitched on, we're going to be able to trim off this extra and just follow the edge of this fused piece. Now when we turn it over, we have that first flap, which is this flap right underneath. We need to do one more flap. We're going to repeat the same thing. I like to work from the back side, match my corner to corner, and I need to make sure that it is on the opposite corners. Pin and stitch as close as I can along the edge. Same thing, we get to trim off this extra. Now we have that back lined up. We can always run a little bead of glue right along that inside so that it doesn't flap open. Or you can wait, and once it's embellished, decide if you need to close that. The next thing we need to do is that front piece and flap. A good size to start with is 8 inches by about 11 inches. We will need to add the flap and then add this piece on top. We will need to fuse these pieces down and fuse this side on. And the easiest thing to use is a fusible web like Heat and Bond. The Heat and Bond red is the strongest, and you can't sew through it, and you don't need to sew through it. So it's a good one to use for this project. When the paper comes off, we're going to have that glue onto that surface. Find the center point by folding the fabric in half and just doing a slight press with your hands. And then fold the corners to meet the center. And then carefully press this little flap down, but do not touch the glue. Now we can take this piece and put it on top. We can adjust this piece so that the edges are going to come clean with the edge of the flap. If there's a little extra, we're going to be able to trim that off. Now we can fuse these layers together. The Heat and Bond is going to keep this little seam nice and flat, and it won't fray because all of the fibers have been glued down. We now have glued this inside envelope to the outside. Once this is all trimmed down, we have that flap that will go inside, front side where we can write an address, and the pocket. To secure this all together, do one row of stitching right along this top edge, as close as you can to the edge, and then do a nice little zigzag around those 3 corners. So we're stitching all the way around. That last row of stitching means we are now done and ready for the embellishing. Now this doesn't need to be for Valentine's Day. It could be made as a gift out of the matching fabric if you're going to give a quilt away. It could be used for birthday presents. There's lots of things that we can use these for. And because they fit in the little mailing envelopes, they're a lot of fun to give. I can now embellish this for my husband. So I have some hugs and kisses, some kissing lips, and I'm going to use some buttons. I will also continue to use that Heat and Bond, the red one, that doesn't need sewing. So I've traced my 2 kisses onto the paper side of that fusible web. So the glue is on the back. And I did make sure that I had some paper all the way around the outside. I'm going to do that in 2 different reds. So all I will need is 2 little scraps of fabric. I still have that larger piece of paper that I peeled off, so I'm going to use that to protect my iron and my surface. Before fusing anything on, your fabric should be pressed without any wrinkles. That way the glue will stick better. The fabric is right side down. Then I have this little shape that I've drawn with that glue side. The glue and the back side of the fabric are going to match. And I have that shiny piece of the backing paper facing the glue. Follow the directions and press. We do need to let this cool down. I have 2 little red kisses, and my hug is going to be that outside circle with a button in the center. Once these are cooled down, I can cut them out. I will be fusing those hugs and kisses on one of the corners. An easy way to take that paper off the back is to take a pin and run that pin along the paper. So you're putting a little cut in the paper. That's going to give you a little area to start and peel back. So the paper's gone and we have the glue on that one side. And do that to all your shapes. If you want to fussy cut a shape, take some of the heat and bond and fuse it on the back side of the fabric. And just make sure it's big enough so that when you turn it over, you're going to be able to cut out your shape. And then peel back the paper and you have that shape cut out. Once that's placed on top, take that paper, shiny side down, and fuse those on. We can always take this flap and just fold it right along that edge and press this edge down, and that way that flap is going to stay down. And to design the back, you might want to have that down to start with, so you have a better idea on where you want to place things. I have the hugs and kisses done. I need to add my lips. Now we can cut these out with that fusible web in red, or we can be very corny. Put on our favorite lipstick and kiss the envelopes. So it's being sealed with a kiss. Yes, this is very corny, but it's going to be a lot of fun. I will not be sewing the buttons on. I'm going to glue them on. And I have found that there is a glue you can get in Walmart called High Tack that works really well and it dries clear. These buttons were glued on and you can see that you can't see any of the glue. And they stick on really well. We can put a paper letter just like we normally would, or we can make a fabric letter. For the fabric letter, I have taken 2 pieces of fabric and have fused them together with that heat and bond. I've used a pretty fabric on one side and a plain white fabric on the other side. And in this case, I did use a lined fabric. And I can see those lines on the back side, so I'm going to be able to follow them to write my love letter. And when I'm done, I can place that letter inside and close up the envelope. These can be so much fun to make. They can definitely be corny. Fun patterns for children, gift cards, and cards to match the quilts. And we can just slide those right in to a bubble envelope, seal it up, and it's very easy to mail. I would love to see your designs, so I will put a link in the description to a Facebook page where we can post pictures and share them with each other. It'll be fun to see how many different designs that we can really do. And thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe and come on back. Let's see what we're making next time in the sewing room. Happy Valentine's Day.